Hello YouTube. Now, this video is a response to Philo71's video, Reasons for the Skeptic to Believe. I'll put the link over there in the sidebar so you can watch it and go and watch it for yourselves. Now, I know this video was directed at skeptics and atheists, but Philo71 offhandedly dismisses my beliefs as being created in my mind, as if they weren't real at all, and I just thought it was important to address that. Now, Philo71, in your video you talk about truth, so I'm going to put this into language that you can understand. The Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster is a vastly better moral guide to life than the Bible. The Gospel of the FSM contains far more wisdom than the Bible. The Gospel of the FSM is far more reliable than the Bible. Now, I want to focus on the reliability of the Bible because that's what most of your video deals with. Now, there's a very strong case to be made that Jesus never even existed at all. Our prophet, the prophet Bobby Henderson, is alive and well today. You can actually email him and contact him via our website, and I'll put the link in the sidebar for you. But for the sake of the argument, let's just grant that Jesus did in fact exist. Now, you touched briefly on who wrote the Bible, and I think most scholars actually agree that the authors were anonymous and they were not the disciples. But, you argued that they were, but it doesn't really matter. We know that there is a considerable argument there, and it's not actually set in stone. Whereas with our book, the Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, we know that it was written by the prophet Bobby Henderson. In fact, I can actually go to the information in the book here, and it says, a Villard Books Trade Paperback Original, copyright 2006 by Bobby Henderson, all rights reserved, published in the United States by Villard Books. It's all right here in the book, and there's no debate about it, so we can see this is clearly much more reliable than the Bible in that sense. But let's just, for the sake of this argument, we'll just grant that the Bible was in fact written by the disciples that you claim that it was written by. The Bible is nearly 2,000 years old and has a very dirty history. Now, you don't address this at all in your video. I'm not really sure why. And I'm not going to go, and for that reason I'm not going to go into it so much myself, but I'll put some links in the sidebar to some additional information where people can go and look at the history of the Bible. Whereas the Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, this one right here, we know it was written just a few years ago. We know that this is the only edition. We can trust this edition. And the prophet Bobby Henderson is still alive, so we can go and ask him for clarification on anything that's in the book. So I'm going to grant, for the sake of the argument, that in those 2,000 years, through all the translations and all that time, the Bible is exactly the same as it was written. I've granted you several things for the sake of this argument. So 1, we've granted that Jesus did in fact exist. 2, we've granted that the writings of the Bible were in fact written by the disciples, and they do accurately reflect Jesus' life. And 3, in the 2,000 years since they were written, we're going to grant that they are unchanged. So what we should have is the Bible, an exact account of Jesus' life with no changes whatsoever. And now let's compare that to the Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which we know is much more reliable anyway, but we're just going to look at the content of the two books. Now, we already know from Truth 1 and 2 that the Gospel is a far better guide to morality than the Bible, and contains much more wisdom than the Bible. Now, if you or anyone else wants to refute that, I'd be more than happy to hear your arguments. Pastafarianism is the only religion supported by scientific evidence. Now, earlier I spoke of truth, and I have to point out and make it clear that in our scientific and intellectual position as Pastafarians, we are not allowed to proclaim, to know any truths. So when I spoke of truth earlier, I was speaking merely of something that we are very sure about. Just on that point, I'd like to read you a short quote. This is from the Gospel, Propaganda 1, page 93. Our principles preclude us from claiming we know any truths. Instead, we make a strong argument for our beliefs with the realization that they could be wrong. Now, Philo71, you end your video by saying that you believe the things that you believe because they are based on excellent, sound, and logical reasons. You have no business coming on YouTube and making arguments using words like logical and evidence and reasons until you can admit the fact that you might be wrong.